Next item up is item 3F. And
Okay, welcome back. Item 3F. This is the item we bring to you on an annual basis. This is the review of our lump sum death benefit. This is a benefit that is paid that eventually all of our members will receive. As a retired member, yes, unfortunately, you know what they say. There are two certainties in life, death and taxes. So we are talking about the lump sum death benefit. Contrary to the discussion we had before lunch around our SBMA program, this is a death benefit that in 1992 was set at a $5,000 level. An existing statute provides authority to you as a board to increase this amount to keep up with inflation. So historically, the board has increased that death benefit several times. The last time it was done, that is listed on TRB 198, was in 2002 when the board increased the amount to $6,163. This is for retired members and those under coverage A. And by statute, active members in coverage B get 4 times that amount. So today that amount is $24,652. But the real number we're looking at is we focus most on the retired members because that's generally when it's paid, and it's $6,163. So annually we have to bring this item for you to consider as to whether or not it should be increased. We have 4 options in the agenda item. They are listed on TRB 199, and it's basically a range from a kind of a minimal increase of 1% to the highest amount you are able to set it by law, which is to keep up with inflation since 2002. Since 2002, inflation has accumulated to about 46%. So basically, if we were to fully index with inflation, we would raise that benefit to $9,005. Now, contrary to the SBMA, this is a benefit that is funded as part of the defined benefit program. And based on the way our funding plan is structured, the way we'll interpret the law is this is something that would fall on the state side of the unfunded liability. That would be the responsibility of the state. So the 4 options in front of you, and again, it could be set at anything in between. This is not these are not the only 4 options you can consider. They all have a cost associated with it. The most expensive option to go to $9,000, we estimate it would increase the unfunded liability by about $405 million, and that it would require contribution through 2046 of about 0.91% of salary to be borne by the state as a contribution. So from our side, the staff's recommendation is to keep it as is, keeping into account that, as you saw this morning, we already have an unfunded liability that exceeds $100 billion on the defined benefit side. And this is a benefit increase that would result in a contribution increase requirement for the state. So with this, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Steve?
Thank you. I'm guessing that I probably should know this, but what's the difference between a family allowance death benefit and a survivor benefit? So A and B. How do you qualify for one versus
So
the other?
basically, in 1992, when coverage B was introduced, all new active members were required to go into coverage B. So we have about 40 or so thousand people left in coverage A, so they tend to be mostly those hired before 1992. But at that time, every member in coverage A was given the option, if they wanted to move, everyone in coverage A was given the option to move to coverage B if they wanted. So some members did. So that's the main thing. But all the new hires are in there. And it's just a different name. The benefits are very similar. There are some instances where under coverage B, a member may get a smaller disability benefit than they would have had before under coverage A, which is why coverage B was not mandated, but provided as an option. Because they were able to get a slightly higher death benefit in coverage B, but they did coverage B.
There was an offset.
There was an offset in coverage B.
And I guess I'll just say, it seems doesn't seem insignificant. I mean, it's currently in the range between 6 and 24,000. 6 for A and 24,000. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
So it's significant if you're in B versus A. I'm just
Yes.
trying to understand that. And you said we haven't done this since 2002?
To increase, to provide, to increase the
increase.
debt benefit to reflect increases in inflation.
And just finally, your recommendation would be that we keep it at the 2002 level for the time being?
Yes, considering the fact that we are still kind of asking the employers and the state to contribute more to help pay off for the unfunded liability in the defined benefit plan.
I'm sorry, I thought I was done, but I'm not. So do we go out and do an assessment of what it costs somebody to die in this state?
So the last time we did that, and we certainly could look at it again, there was an item presented to this board, if I recall, in September of 15, where we looked at it. And the last time we looked at it, the answer is, it depends the choice that is selected at the time of death by the family. A traditional burial would generally exceed the amount that they get paid, but someone electing to do cremation generally ends up below this cost. So that was sort of provided in 2015. We see more and more cremation, but again, it depends a lot on what the options are selected. Also, what's not clear is what was the benefit. Nowhere in the law does it say what is the benefit meant to be for. So some are arguing that it should be for more than just the cost of the funeral. Maybe it should also cover some of the end-of-the-life expenses. A lot of that was covered in the September 15 item, which we can certainly provide a copy again to all of you. But we haven't really updated and looked at this for almost 3 years now.
And I would guess you could assess to the extent that the amount provided might drive a person's choice. So that if you're only providing $6,000, I may choose to get or I may choose to cremate somebody because I can't afford to pay much more than that.
That's a correct statement.
So, I mean, and I say that in all seriousness because I think we should be taking into account if we're driving the decisions because it's such a low number. And I'm not saying it is. You may be better equipped to tell me that. That should also have an indicator, but I recognize that you're looking at it strictly through fiscal eyes and saying anything we do here is going to add to the unfunded liability, and therefore, but that's probably true with a lot of things. And so, I guess from my perspective, and on behalf of the treasurer, I'd probably be more inclined to look at helping at least keep this up with inflation, but that's just one person's opinion. Sorry, I'm done.
Thank you, Steve. Kara?
Okay. It was very emotional for me to look at the previous item and then to look at this item too, because the members will not benefit really from this. It's the survivors that will. So I was just trying to think, is $6,000 enough for funeral and death benefit survivors and whatever you want to call it? And as you said, I wasn't sure if survivors get the money, they aren't restricted on what they spend it for, correct?
No, it's paid to them.
So just out of curiosity, I went on 2 funeral directors' websites, common ones in Sacramento. And the rates they go from A to B. I mean, one said $1,800 for the basic services. The other one said $2,500 for basic services. And then the list goes on about all the other extra things that you might need. And then as far as cremation, they basically are about a couple $100 of difference between the two. And so, but it seems like, I wasn't able to get some of the funeral homes, you have to actually go there and you have to, if it's pre-need or immediate information, they don't readily give you that information. And so I was just trying to compare, is that $6,000 enough? Maybe yes, maybe no, but it all depends on, what the financial situation of the family is at that time too. So, and sometimes the benefits, the beneficiaries or the members are alone. So what happens then? So I was really torn between, are these numbers correct? I wanted to find a couple more just to have like a comparison, but I don't know if this is the high one or if this is the low one. So I just was trying to gather some information, so hopefully you'll be able to do that in the future.
Yeah, and we can certainly bring back the direction of the board to bring back an item to look at it again. Again, we looked at it in 2015, and we did provide a range of cost information depending on the type of burial and depending also where in California they are located. Because one thing that became clear the last time we did it is if you want to bury someone, the cost of obtaining a site in a cemetery can be quite expensive, especially in the Bay Area. That was the most expensive area that we looked at, easily exceeding $10,000 just to simply to obtain a burial
Because
site.
it's like real estate, really.
Yes, correct.
Well, it is, yeah, it is real estate.
It's real estate.
Yeah, the biggest drive in America is just the change in proportionality with
Yes.
cremation. I mean, America's become much more like Europe and other countries where land is
Premium.
difficult to find for that purpose. So the mix has changed quite a bit in here. And I think what you said, I actually used to regulate the funeral industry when I was insurance commissioner, so I have a lot of experience in that area. And you are right, the add-on costs on a traditional burial are
Yeah, there's a whole list. There's a whole
extraordinary.
list.
So that's the issue. I think, if I could, I think that'll, the problem with is just getting something that feels right for the membership, because the purpose of it is not specifically defined. If you were buying term life insurance, you probably wouldn't buy a $5,000 policy, ever. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So, I think it'll be hard to get it mathematically correct to what the cost of a funeral is today if we go down that path. But as a guidepost, I think you're very right, Karen. It's fairly inexpensive for cremation if you don't do add-ons or bury the urn in an actual plot. Some people do that, actually. They put an urn in a plot. But then a traditional funeral is quite expensive, quite expensive. But the funeral industry, to Steve's comment, is quite persuasive, often at the time of
Sure.
death. So, their cost structure is quite high.
Anything else, Karen?
No, thank you. Thank you.
Lynn?
Thank you. I was just curious if action could be taken on just coverage A, or does it have to apply to coverage B as well?
It has to, so by law, coverage B is set to be 4 times the amount of coverage A.
All right. Thank you.
And again, coverage B tends to be, I would say, the least expensive part, although the amount seems higher because it's only paid while they're actively working. So a coverage B member, once they retire, what they're entitled to is the coverage A benefit. So the $24,000 you see there is only paid if they were to die while actively employed, which is a very, very small number. Thankfully, it's a very small number.
All right, thank you.
Is that just for the, and those benefits to their spouses or any of it?
Correct, it's only to the member, correct. Yeah.
Any further speakers? Alrighty, we'll go to the mics. Paula?
I have to stand on my toes. I just want to
Hang on a
point
second,
out,
Paula, hang on a second. Chuck, can you help her out there?
I'm okay.
No, we're gonna make this comfortable for you. Chuck will have to raise it.
I have to get used to doing it. I just want to point out that taxes come out of that $6,000. And there's also a very funny thing going on with this last month's salary. So depending on what day in the month, you have to maybe return it. So that puts more stress on the family. I did have a friend who passed away, and I called them up and said, you have a death benefit. It ended up $4,000. So just look at the whole picture. And yes, it's expensive to die. It's also expensive to live. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Chuck.
I'm surprising myself. I'm going to do this twice. I'm Chuck Denon, and I'm a retired teacher, live in Placer County, and I'm kind of amazed. We talked about this in 2015. I guess it's a line out of a movie. talky, talky, talky. It's time to do something. In the first 10 years of this program, the CalSTRS board saw fit to raise this amount 8 times. I was a math teacher, let me think. Starting in 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh, we talked in 15. 16, 17. In 18, 16 discussions later, or failure to have the discussion, it's at the same level. I applaud the comments from the representative of the treasurer. It's time to do something. It's time to put some money on there. There's many reasons. When my wife passed away, I had to have money immediately available to deal with some of the things, and the end result was that Prudential check that came my way was a nice little help. Never intended to cover all expenses or whatever the expenses people face. But Jack also pointed out something. Oh yeah, the basic funeral is here. And by the time I looked at page 3 of the add-ons, page 3, it had gone from $1,000 to about $4,000. Nothing fancy, nothing special. Oh, that's right, we need 2 cops in the front and 2 cops in the back, and we need to do this and we need to do that, and all of those things are necessary. I just say, let's at least start with some number between the 6,000 and the 9,000, and then see how it works. I think the people out there really would appreciate it. I don't know, as you do all your studies, you ought to look at how many people are passing away every month. And yes, the money goes to the beneficiary that's listed. You know what? I know a lot of retired teachers. They know all they're getting is 6,000. They know it. We tell them it's 7,500 now. Wow. I'm glad CalSTRS is thinking about me. I hope you are.
Pat Geyer, retired teacher. I'll be very brief. Raising this is not going to significantly impact the fund. This is a tiny, tiny part of the total fund. And raising it is not going to make a difference, but it's going to make a big difference to the heirs and the people that are left. And I would appreciate you do something.
Any further speakers? Oh, hi, Dave. Come on up.
For a change, I'll be brief too. It's a vested benefit with a vested mechanism to increase it. And retirees really do feel like you don't care about them sometimes. And this is an issue for us, and we hope you do address it.
Loretta Toggenberger, UTLA, retired. I have 8 children. I bought 8 lots, 25 years ago. And my daughter died 4 years ago. And and she was cremated. That's the cheaper way to go. You don't need all the extras. And let me tell you, if they have to open up the lot for me, it will be $3,500 just to open the lot to put the box in. And to get the box from the mortuary over to the grave is $50. That's what we're talking about, add-ons. And the survivors are stuck paying for just to get the box in, or if they're going to use a casket, that is big-time money today. So we need to give the survivor the money to at least half pay. And then if you're Irish, like I am, then you have what we call a wake. And that Irish wake runs into money also. But we don't have to supply the money for that. But just remember that Irish wake does, all the add-ons add on. So we need that raise so the survivor can at least get them in the ground.
Thank you, Loretta. There's no further speakers. We do have it. Jackie. I don't know if you actually go by Jackie. I apologize. Jacqueline. I have a terrible habit of doing that with my students too.
I wanted to comment first on the Milliman report that I really, I'm looking at the recommendation on TRB 205. I thought that that was really thoughtful, the way that they put that paragraph together. That it's really, you know, the adjustment should be granted by the retirement board only if the system can afford to do so. And then it kind of goes on to talk about how members and employers in the state are currently experiencing or have experienced significant increases in their contribution rates. I think it's worth noting that we have an unfunded liability. This is a small amount of money, but to me, our role and our duty here is really to the best interests of the system. And I think that adding additional expenses right now, we should really think hard about. I mean, at a time when there is a lot of attention on increased contributions and on our funding plan to fund that unfunded liability. And I'm very comfortable with the staff's recommendation, recognizing that there is need out there, but that there's also need out there for our members themselves that would benefit. And I think that our duty to the system is really to put it in the best financial system financial situation so that we can pay the benefits owed to our members. And so I'm having a hard time with the idea of increasing a benefit when we're still in a long-term funding plan to be able to pay out the retirement benefits that we owe to our teachers. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I'm very comfortable with the staff's recommendation for 1 more year, and I'm prepared to move that.
Jacqueline, there's no one else in line to ask a question, so it's time for a motion if you want to move that.
I would move the staff recommendation. I don't know if that's the feeling of the board. Anybody can jump in with the substitute motion.
Absolutely. So there is a motion on the floor to adopt staff's recommendation. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we'll open up discussion on the motion then. Karen?
Well, when I looked at the chart, it said, like was mentioned earlier, that the last time it was increased was 2002. So that's quite a bit of years. So I'm just assuming that every year that this issue came up, they kind of said status quo, just leave it the way it is, right?
Correct. For
Okay.
the last 15 years,
For
that's
the
what the
last
board did.
15
Correct.
years. Okay. And so now we have an opportunity as a board to make a slight increase in that and affect the unfunded liability, as Jacqueline was saying, by not that much. So, and it looks like the increases from year to year that were made since 1997 were about $100 or more per year. So even if we do the 1% increase or even the 3.4 increase, the amount of money would be probably around a couple $100, correct?
Yes, and they are listed on page 199.
Right. So if you did the difference, and so if we said, okay, well, let's go with the 3.4, then it will only be, what, $200?
Yeah, it will go up by about $209. And again, you don't have to go with these options. If you
Right.
wanted to say, let's increase it by $500 or let's set it at $7,000. It is,
Okay.
you can select any amount you want, but you cannot exceed $9,005. That is the maximum you can set by statute.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that. So I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I want to make
If you want to change the motion.
The motion.
You can offer a substitute, because anything you do would be substantially different than what
Than what
Jacqueline
she's
put forward.
doing.
So you'd
Okay.
have to have a substitute.
Okay, I would like to make a substitute motion then. So I don't know whether or not if it's a dollar amount that I need to give or a percentage.
Either one.
How,
Either one,
whatever you want.
$1 is fine if you want to pick it.
We'll calculate it either way.
how about like, I don't know, 250?
Yeah.
Do
So
you wanna
250,
figure
yeah,
out
that would make it,
percentage first?
just to be clear, that would
Percentage?
make it $600, $413.
Flat rate?
Okay.
Is that it? All right, is there a second for the substitute? Absolutely.
What's the roughly?
All right, so our substitute motion is to add $250 to the cover, well, it'll ramp it up, both will be ramped up by 250, right?
Correct. And just for the record, this would be slightly more than the second option listed on 199. So you're probably looking at around $30 million increase in the unfunded. It might be a little bit more, a little bit less, but just neighborhood of $30 million increase in unfunded liability. Since it's a little bit more than the second option in the
A
table.
little bit more than 3.4,
Correct.
okay? All right.
But it increases
Hey,
coverage B by 1,000.
Coverage B.
Yes, and increases the coverage fee by $1,000.
Oh, because it's 4 times the.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Yeah. I'm gonna let Karen talk to it if she wants to more. Steve would like to talk to it, and then we'll have, staff explain the implications of the motion. How's that? Okay?
Yeah.
Do you want to speak anymore?
No.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, let me first ask staff a question, then I want to see if I can offer a friendly amendment to what Karen offered. So under your rationale that it adds to the unfunded liability, at what point would we ever get about to increase the death benefit?
So if you vote on it today.
No. I'm just saying, your rationale was to keep it at the current rate because we would otherwise add to the unfunded liability. At what point, or what year, will we be in a position to add to the death benefit?
That's a very good question.
I mean, we're talking way out.
No,
in a few
you know,
years.
you
Yeah,
would,
that's what
and
we're
you
talking
would
about.
always add to the unfunded liability. I think originally our thought were to maybe let the funding plan work a little longer. Again, we understand that the increases are fairly minimal.
I think
But-
that was more it, Steve. It was to get through the 7 years of ramp up
Yeah.
on the plan, not 30 years. But,
So when would that be?
well, we have 3 more years left to ramp up, but that was all the issue was. Obviously, we're
Okay, yeah,
still,
because it would seem otherwise, we're gonna be here forever waiting.
absolutely.
To erase the
I think the
unfunded
point being,
liability.
obviously, we know on the political side, this is an unstable situation we have.
2021.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but let me go ahead and see if I can convince Karen. I'm hesitant to just offer arbitrary numbers. At least the 3.4 had some rationale. It was based on what the cost of living adjustment would have been since 2016. So regardless of whatever the math is, I'm much more comfortable in saying if we do something, it was based on the rationale that we're just merely trying to keep it with the most recent impact of inflation, not even looking at what it's been since 2002. So Karen, I don't know if you'd be willing, it's gonna lower the amount a little bit.
So
But
Steve, parliamentary,
yeah, please.
I'd like you to offer a substitute
Okay,
motion.
so I'd like to offer a substitute motion, and I hope I can convince Karen. Would be to keep it to the 3.4 percent increase, and you can tell us what the dollar amount is.
41.
It's on page, it's on TRB 199. It's the second
199.
line in the item. So it would increase the debt benefit for coverage A and retired members to $6,372. And
Okay,
4
that's-
times that for coverage B.
That's how much over the current?
So the current is $6,163, so about basically $209.
Okay.
So it's a
Alright.
difference of $41 between the 250
Yeah.
and what you.
Yeah, and again, only in the interest of just hewing to at least a rationale as to why we did it. So if in fact we're trying to keep pace with inflation, at least for the most recent increase, that's what I would feel comfortable in being able to tell people.
Okay.
All right, do we have a second for the substitute motion?
Second.
All righty. So, Steve, do you want to speak any more to it?
No, I'm done.
Okay, so David, can you explain the implications for us, please?
Sorry, can you
So,
repeat?
to make sure that everybody's clear on what the motion would do.
So the motion right now would, starting July 1st of 18, so any members that dies on or after July 1st of 2018, a lump sum will be paid to the family. If they're actively working, if they are coverage A, it will be $6,372. If they are actively working and they're on coverage B, it will be $25,488. If they are retired members, it will be $6,372. That would be if death occurs on or after July 1st of 18.
Nora, you good?
So the overall impact is
The overall impact, we've estimated it about $28 million. And cost-wise, you're talking about, we listed in the item 0.007% of payroll. So it is a fairly minimal cost.
So. Harry already did. That's okay. David, explain how the cost of that falls on the state, please.
So we've had some debates internally as to whether that a pre-90 or post, no, which benefit structure does it fall under? And a determination was made years ago, because it's been, the idea of the funding plan has been in place for several years, that since that benefit had been in place in the program for many, many, many years, and that even if the board increase it today, that it still should be on the state side, because it's been something that's been in statute for so long. So that's why even if you adopt it today, it still falls under the, if you
least
want,
that would
what
be
we
our
view as the
viewpoint of it.
responsibility of the
Right.
state. Yeah.
Okay.
David, what's the CalPERS? Is that in here? What is the CalPERS?
It's not. So CalPERS, for the school members at CalPERS, it is set to $2,000. And at CalPERS, some local agencies, not the school employers, can elect various options ranging from $500 to $5,000.
I see.
But for me as a state employee and all of us working here, we get 2,000. School employers that are CalPERS members get 2,000.
Harry?
All right.
Harry?
All of our
Loretta
staff
has
took
the
note of
floor.
that.
Madam Tottenberger has the floor. I think the UC has I think, yeah, there's a range of benefits. So we're trying to balance the reality of the points that Jacqueline pointed out. We have an unfunded obligation, trying to meet the needs of retired members. We're going to do this responsibly. I think my math is correct. The 28 million is 3/100ths of a percent. I mean, it's really, really, really small.
Yes.
I mean, the 28 million is like, if I used 100, and it's like, but it is something, it's a drop. So I'm trying to weigh that drop against the benefit and the concerns. And then all of the other aspects of how it affects people, institutions. It's a tough decision. It's a tough decision. And I looked at, and I also looked back, I looked at this slide from one of the earlier presentations where it shows the funding status of CALS, the defined benefit program from decades. You can go to 2002, and there's, when we last increased the benefit, it was 2002 or 2003?
Yeah.
2002.
The funded status of the system is going in this direction, while the death benefit is staying flat.
Right.
So there's a, yeah, it's a tough one, but it's a really small impact.
It is. David, what was the legislation to increase the benefit? How much? Do you remember? The CalPERS?
When was the legislation to?
The legislation that was attempted, how much was that increasing their benefit?
Oh, at CalPERS, so to bring it in line with ours, to 6,163.
Oh, they were bringing it in line with our benefit.
They were trying, yeah,
I see.
the school school members at CalPERS have tried to increase their debt benefit for several years, trying to match what we offer our teachers.
And one just last point, I know our friends who are advocating a position say, we really want, do you really care about our retirees? I know they know we care about the retirees and that we're trying to balance a lot of different issues. So I hope the perception is not the CalSTRS board doesn't care about California's retirees. We do. We're just trying to balance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Paul?
And same thing from the staff. We
Yeah,
care about them as well.
exactly.
Correct.
But you're getting. Because he's
I'll get cremated. No, it was, Steve made an interesting comment. As some of you know, my father passed away in February, and my mom had this very difficult decision. She was only receiving $2,500. So what do you think she selected?
They
was the
turned to you.
cremation
They said,
choice at exactly $2,500.
yeah. When my dad passed away, we all figured out how much are we all gonna chip in to bury the guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Anyway.
Absolutely. Paul?
Yeah, my question is, and I think this is a great discussion, and I think it's appropriate that we consider all of the factors here. So we have a situation where we have determined that that this board has the power to vote to impose an additional cost on the state, right? Is that power to impose that additional cost on the state something that is granted to the state and they can take it away from us? Like, if the state says, well, what the hell is the CalSTRS board doing, you know, imposing additional costs that we don't have a say about, all of these responsibilities that we now have to set this, as well as the minimum interest rates in our next issue, are those ones that we have to be mindful that, you know, the legislature and the governor might say, well, if these guys just start imposing additional costs on us, we're going to take back that responsibility. And maybe that's a legal question for Brian.
Well, certainly not the last part of what the governor might do, but the mechanisms in the statutes were already in place. And so there's a right for the board to adjust the rate under the statute. And so that right exists in statute. So there's a possibility that there could be a legislative attempt to remove those statutes or change those statutes. But right now, there's a current right.
No, I know we have the right now, but I'm
Right.
saying, can that right be taken away from us by the legislature for future decisions?
Well, there would be a vested rights argument, not particularly as to the amount, but there could be at least a vested rights argument that the ability of the board to set the rate is a right that's vested into the current membership. So it could be a future. So there could be actually a dispute over that based upon the vested nature of the right to have the board look at it annually.
Well, that sure complicates it, okay.
Yes, it's not.
We don't want to go there.
Thank you.
I'll keep my mouth shut. No, well, okay, I won't.
Madam Chair, you don't need to keep your
You know, just a reminder that our unfunded liability before we had the funding plan grew by $22 million a day. All right. We have a substitute to the original motion. We don't have any other speakers. Last chance. All in favor of the substitute, say aye.
Can you remind?
The
sorry.
the substitute was to go to 3.4.
Okay, got it.
All in favor of the substitute to the substitute, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Abstentions? The motion is passed. It becomes the main motion. All in favor of 3.4 as the main motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. They're good. Any abstentions? All righty. The motion
you-
is passed.
Did Jacqueline vote nay?
Yeah. All righty. Thank you,
Okay,
David.
it's almost over. And since you heard a lot from me so far, and the gentleman to my left, Jordan, has been fairly quiet.
And he's
I
waited
decided,
and
he's
waited.
been waiting patiently, so I've asked him to present this item, but before I start, so it's 7 different resolutions, and in the past, you voted on them one at a time. So with this, Jordan?
Thank you, David. So as David mentioned, there are 7 items, 7 separate resolutions to consider. I've just got a few highlights. I'll try and keep this brief. A few points to highlight. First, a summary of all the recommendations are available on TRB 212. Second, we are recommending no changes to the contribution rates for service credit purchases. Recall that last year we had increases to the contribution rates for service credit purchases due to the increased life expectancies and the changes in the assumed interest rate. At that time, we went to the 7% directly, so there are no further changes for this, for these rates, and we are not recommending any changes for them. Finally, all the interest rates are by board policies tied to either the assumed rate of return for the plan or to US Treasuries. So the rates are, again, on 212. The regular interest rate will stay at 7%. It went to 7% last year. The credited interest rate is increasing to 1.54%. The minimum interest rate for the cash balance benefit program is increasing to 2.89%, and the minimum interest rate for the defined benefit supplement program is increasing to 2.89%. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Paul?
Thank you. So I understand we have policies, and without changing the policies, I don't really think there's all that much flexibility we have. I would like to, however, suggest that we should at some point before this time next year revisit the policy on the DB plan credited interest rate, which we say is now the policy is 2.4%. And if I could just explain, is the 2-year treasury, I'm sorry, it's the 2-year treasury. And I think the reason is that, and I've spent a lot of time talking to David and other staff and collected some information. If I could just summarize a little bit about this. We pay refunds. This is used to pay refunds. And we pay refunds in 3 circumstances. One where a member who hasn't vested leaves. A second, when a member has vested but leaves, pulls their money out before collecting their retirement. And the third is a member who starts to collect benefits and then passes away before they've actually recovered in benefits what they contributed during their working life. And so to make sure that they don't lose, we pay them their money back plus interest.
Any leftover contributions plus interest?
Yes, their contributions plus interest. So if you look at the last like 5 years or something, I mean, we're paying, a less than 1% per year on this money, and we're tying it to a 2-year treasury. But the reality is that first of all, people have their money with us for more than 2 years. Those who get a refund because they leave the system, the money based on, I did this calculation based on your data, David, but it's about 4 years. And obviously somebody who passes away and then gets all that money back, they've been in the system for a very long time, so it's a lot more than. So tying it to a 2-year treasury doesn't really necessarily make sense. The other thing is it's just, the idea is that this is retirement savings that people put away. We would hope that actually they take it and they roll it into an IRA or something like that. And that's the tax efficient way to do it, so that they don't. And to suggest that a retirement that we think it would be appropriate for a retirement system to pay less than 1% on the money that is invested through that retirement system, I don't think we'd really feel comfortable. And I'm not sure also that we're treating all members the same. We're paying a different minimum interest rate on DBS, on cash balance, than we are on this. So I would just, I would, and I also know in talking to David, maybe he can say a little bit more about the history of this, is that when systems created this kind of a number, it was in a much higher interest rate environment. So a 2-year treasury was a lot higher, and a lot of other systems, instead of adopting a benchmark like 2-year treasury, they just put a number into their rules, so that a lot of systems are paying 5 or 6% because, and that's what we were paying when we created this rule or this policy. But now interest rates have dropped so low. I don't know. I'd like to ask that, we should follow the policy today, But I'd think we should reopen this policy. That would be my request.
So pleasure of the board to put that on the work plan for benefits and services? Yes? All right.
Thank you.
All righty. David, do you have, oh, I'm sorry. Do you have anything else for us?
No, that's fine.
All righty, so we take these separately, like
Yes.
David said. So I'll entertain motion on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items. We have resolutions for each one of those, correct?
7 items.
Seven.
Because item 7, although the rates are not changing, you are still required to adopt them on an annual basis. So
Got it.
you're just adopting the same rates that are in place this fiscal year. That's for the 7th one.
All righty.
So the first resolution is on TRB 214.
And they just go right after that.
And then go 216, 218, so I can, for ease of your voting, I can
Okay.
give you as you go through. So the first one's on page 214.
All right. And that's regular interest rate? Entertain a motion?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed nay. Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion passes on the regular interest rate, credited interest rate.
Page 216.
Thank you. It's been moved by Sharon.
Second.
Seconded by Lynn. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Any abstentions? We have approved the credited interest rate, the minimum interest rate, 218.
Page 218.
Motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Joy has moved and Karen has seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed nay. Any abstentions? Moving to page 220, minimum interest rate on the DBS.
Move approval.
Sharon's moved.
Second.
We'll go with, was that you, Nora? Okay, we'll go with Nora. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Any abstentions? All right, we've approved the DBS minimum interest rate, the employer contribution rate for elected officials.
223.
That's on 223?
Yes.
Thank you.
Second.
Who moved it? Sharon, okay, Sharon moved it and Lynn has seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Any abstentions? That motion passes. The employer contribution rate for reduced workload,
226.
that's 226. Joy has moved. Sharon has seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Any abstentions? And the last one, the permissive service contribution rate,
234.
Sharon has moved. Nora has second. 231. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed nay. Any abstentions? And we are done with that item. I'm sorry, Paul, I left your speaker on, your mic on. Thank you, guys. All right, it's lunch. All right, Grant, Joycelyn? And we're on TRB page 235.
234.
234.
So congratulations, Chair Dillon and
Thank you
Vice Chair
very much,
Hendricks on your
Grant.
election. Good afternoon, members of the board. I will keep it short and let Joycelyn tackle the legislative items we have. You know, I think if we did the math, we probably have brought fewer bills to you this year for positions. Maybe not. Okay. But I was just going to say, it is nonetheless, Joycelyn and her team are always very busy, whether it's advising people within the building, making trips, monitoring the budget hearings, following up with members of the budget committee afterwards, and doing a lot of the work on bills that you end up ultimately not seeing sometimes. So to me, it felt like a busy year.
Definitely busy. Good afternoon. To start, I wanted to go back a little bit actually to one of the bills that you saw last year, which was SB 560 by Senator Allen, which required the board to consider climate risk. And the last time you took a position on that bill was opposed unless amended. And we took those amendments and we really worked with actually internally with the governmental relations, investment staff, and the legal staff. And we really got to a good place. We're able to work with Senator Allen's staff, and they actually accepted all of the amendments we requested. And they reintroduced that in SB 964, which is the bill before you today. And CalPERS actually worked with them as well and requested a couple other amendments, which they also accepted. So what the bill does now is says, to the extent that CalSTRS and CalPERS identify climate-related financial risk as a material risk to the fund, that the board would analyze it. And then it requires a report back to the board in public. And some of the new features that we didn't discuss last year is that that report would be given every 3 years instead of annually, and that there's a sunset on the bill, which acknowledges that sometimes issues change, and the sunset date is January 31st, 2035. So perhaps in 2035, there'll be a different issue that we'll need to be focusing on in that regard. And so because they accepted all of those amendments and we are fine with the additional amendments, the recommendation for the board position is neutral. I just draw your attention quickly to the fact that there is a cost to the bill noted on TRB 236. And so it's about $150,000, more than $150,000 per year for staff, and to employ an outside consultant to assess the alignment, which is required by the bill, of the fund with the Paris Climate Agreement and California climate policy goals, and then additional costs when we're compiling the report every 3 years.
Steve?
I guess it's a matter of approach. You have an author who accepted all the amendments we offered last year, accepted additional amendments this year. My experience has been that when an author is willing to go the extra yard, just as a matter of legislative relations, and I don't know how Mr. Allen feels, he'll be here another 10 years, that we would give a little more than just being neutral on the bill. I would be inclined to at least offer the idea, if not a proposal, that we find a way to get to support on this. It's consistent with what we already do, I recognize, but I do think it sends a positive message that when people are willing to work with CalSTRS, that we can recognize it in a way that I think is more positive than just going neutral on the bill. So, and maybe at the appropriate time, I'll offer a substitute motion.
Joycelyn, do you want to give your rationale for remaining neutral?
I think because we were looking for them to move to this point for us to think that this had a minimum impact to the fund, but is still additional cost and additional work for staff in a sense. We are doing these things already as well, so it is codifying our practices we already have. So in that case, I mean, do we need to support it if we're already doing it? But to the point about, you know, the fact that we do work with authors and want to indicate that we appreciate their efforts, that's also something to consider.
And let me ask you this. If this is information that we're already reporting, would we have to create another report?
I think because of the way it's being asked for, and the fact that they're also looking for the alignment of the fund with the Paris Climate Agreement and California climate policy goals, I think that's additional pieces.
Go ahead,
We are
Geraldine.
already looking at this risk, so Geraldine Jimenez, Investment Branch. And so we're completely aligned on what we're trying to do. It's the reporting that they're going to ask for, that we're going to have to get the software. It's that extra. But other than that, we are aligned on what they're doing. We think we're already engaging on this issue. And, you know, obviously the board has already expressed that this is an important issue for us.
Alrighty. Steve, did you want to go back?
Only if, are there other speakers?
We do. We do.
Please.
Lynn?
Thank you. So in your conversations with the author, was there any discussion about adding in other pension funds aside from CalSTRS and CalPERS?
There was not.
Because I would think that would be an important consideration for the author to undertake if they really want to get to the issues of transparency. But having said that, on behalf of the controller, while she really lauds the goals of this bill, the fact that CalSTRS is already doing all of these engagements, and as we saw yesterday in the report on our ESG program, we are making this very public. So it seems a little odd to support legislation to direct us to do what we essentially are doing already. Thank you.
Okay, my line went away. You sure? Harry?
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate both Steve and Lynn's comments. I agree with both of them. It made sense to me to inquire as to why we wouldn't take a support position. And then I heard Geraldine, and then I heard Lynn, and Lynn's point makes perfect sense to me. We're doing all of this already. Why do we need legislation to reinforce what we're already doing? So sitting here,
So.
That's why we're a board.
There you go. So Joycelyn, is it impacting anyone else other than us that is not doing this? Is that how kind of we got wrapped up in it?
It just affects CalSTRS and CalPERS, I think, is the largest pension systems in the state, and so they wanted to focus on the two of us. I believe they also have some efforts going on along these lines, but I can't speak to them.
I'm sorry, what?
CalPERS, since they're focused on the two
No,
of us.
I missed that part.
Yeah.
I missed the first word in that sentence, so I apologize. All right, we don't have anyone else in line to speak. I think we do have someone waiting in a microphone.
Thanks very much. I'm Janet Cox with Fossil Free California. We are one of the sponsors of the bill. I think the reason why it's a good thing to support it, even though you're already doing it, is that it allows the rest of the pension world to hear loud and clear what your values are. And this really is an opportunity to lead. Just as California is leading on climate in general, I think that CalSTRS can lead in this kind of transparency. And I just think that considering that we all want to get to the point where all pension funds are taking climate-related financial risk into account, having this board take an affirmative position on this bill, even though you're already doing it, serves that goal. And just as an aside, I want to thank you for your amazing, wonderful, compassionate discussion of the items that have gone before. I didn't want to get up here without saying that. It was really wonderful to hear you all caring so much about your beneficiaries. Thanks.
Thank you.
So my name is Christine Shoemaker. I'm a resident of Woodland. I'm a retired plant biologist and the legislative co-chair with Fossil Free California. And I'm here to ask you to vote for full support on SB 964. And as you've heard, it's a bill that we co-sponsored. And this bill defines into law a definition of climate-related financial risk. And just to put in perspective, I don't know whether you all saw this, but Cal EPA just released a 351-page report called Indicators of Climate Change in California, and the articles about it in the SAC-B and the San Francisco Chronicle. And it came that the results are unequivocal. There's more intense fires, there's longer droughts, there's snowpack loss, there's sea level rise, and there's increased temperatures. And all these are happening, and they're happening now. And these things that they were looking at are basically the same as what we're looking at in this legislation. And these things, like I said, are happening now. They're not happening in the future. So I'd like to ask you to support. It seems prudent for CalSTRS to consider known and present impacts. And reporting it and making it very broadly available gives a broader view, says that CalSTRS is being responsible, and it sends a message not only to people within California, but across the U.S. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Harry?
Geraldine, if we were to take a support position of the bill, would it adversely affect or materially impact what the team is doing?
No, I mean,
Okay.
what it would call for is more special reporting on carbon footprinting. It's just as extra reporting, but
And it begins in that reporting requirement would start in 3 years,
yeah,
right?
In 2020.
So we'd have time to kind of
we would.
get ready.
We have put our energies just on where we think are the most obvious areas to engage in. So we think the report is interesting, but it wouldn't change how we're engaging.
So I'm leaning more towards supporting the legislation because I think now more so than ever, we need to be public and more public about the priority we place on climate risk as a large institutional investor. And maybe if we were in a, no pun intended, if we were in a different environment nationally, maybe it wouldn't be necessary, but I think now more so than ever, I think it's an important statement to be made. So I'm leaning towards taking a support position on the item.
Steve?
Before I make a motion, I just want to say, normally I wouldn't have a problem with a neutral position. My concern is I can see that position being used against the bill. Because as the nature of hearings go, they'll say, well, where is CalSTRS and CalPERS? And I don't know where CalPERS is on the bill. But where are they? And the statement will not only be, if at all, that they're neutral, but they're already doing it. And it'll obviate any kind of momentum, I think, for this bill to move forward. And I think it's generally a positive thing. So that's my only concern with being neutral and gray on this. And not, the cost to us is fairly de minimis. And so with that in mind, I would go ahead and make a motion to amend the staff recommendation to support the bill in the legislature.
Is there a second? It's been moved by Steve, seconded by Sharon, to move to support the bill. Karen?
I was noticing on the grid that it's in the suspense file in the Senate Appropriations. What's the outlook? What are you hearing as far as movement?
So actually, I haven't had any indication on whether or not they think it will come off of suspense. I mean, I think they're similar and actually maybe a little bit higher reporting costs on the CalPERS side.
Okay.
So I think it depends on the rest of Senator Allen's bill package and what other bills he has on suspense and how much those cost and how he's able to reduce costs for those measures.
Okay, and it was amended in the Senate, right? I'm just
Correct.
assuming that it was. Okay. Thank you.
And did we reach out to his office to see if they plan on pulling it out of suspense?
It's up to the committee.
Up
So
to
the committee will
committee.
consider all of the bills that are on suspense and determine which ones should remain.
Paul?
Thank you. So I think I'm sticking with the staff recommendation on this one. And the reason is because this doesn't seem to me to have anything to do with whether we engage on climate change. We already are. We're not, we continue to ratify that. The issue here is whether we are, it seems to me in supporting this bill, what we're doing is we're inviting the legislature to tell us to give reports that I don't really think are their responsibility to ask of us on the way in which we carry out our fiduciary duty. And that's what concerns me. I think this is our responsibility. And we're doing it. And if there's a question as to whether we're failing in our fiduciary duty, they you know, I suppose there are ways they can do something about, you know, questioning that. But it seems to me this is just about them asking us to deliver them a report on us already doing what we're supposed to do.
All right, so we're racking up some speakers here. I do want the board to be cognizant of how far we are behind schedule. Nora?
So I will in the end go with the greater sort of support of everybody, but I do think that the neutral piece is an important piece. I don't like creating legislation to create legislation so we can create a document. I think the intent of what Harry is saying is really, really important, and we need to be sharing information. But I'm always very nervous about creating legislation or mandates for people to be able to do the right thing for institutions. And so I would support it because I understand the intention of it. But I would caution us in, you know, creating legislation to do the right thing as we're moving forward, because it creates a lot more red tape that sometimes is not necessary.
Harry?
Thanks, Paul. So, you know, I have the right to change my mind, and I'm literally changing it as I get more information. And it's purpose for discussion. I think Paul's points resonate with me, more so than, we want to send a statement. I am also leery of the fact that, of the points that Paul has made, and also support the comments that Nora just made. So I've now changed my mind 3 times. It's like, where are we going to dinner? Melissa says we're going here, Sarah says we're going there, and I say I'm going, and then let's take a vote, and I always lose 2-1. Melissa said, Dad, you lost. No, all kidding aside, it's just, I think the staff recommendation outweighs the need to support the legislation for the points made by Paul and Nora.
Lynn?
Just want to check in with the staff. So from your perspective, a neutral position is not an opposed position. Does that really damage the chances of the bill passing? Because I think that the goals are very laudable, and of course, the controller has always been a champion of ESG and all of the work that we're doing on climate change here. So just wanted to hear from you about that.
Correct. I would say that neutral is nowhere close to opposed. I think it indicates that we're fine with the bill, but I think to the points you made earlier and Mr. Rosensteel and Ms. Vargas made, that's kind of what we're aiming for with the neutral recommendation.
Okay, then I still think it's, I still think that the staff recommendation is the appropriate recommendation. Thank you.
So in other words, Joyce, what you're telling us is a slippery slope.
That is a potential.
Go ahead.
I'd like to say that as far as I'm concerned, the heart of the bill isn't the reporting requirement. It is the definition of climate-related financial risk. And this will be the first bill in the nation to define climate-related financial risk. And if it passes, I think that you're likely to see other states and other pension funds paying attention and considering a statutory definition of climate-related financial risk. I think, if I could had to cut the bill in half and pick one side, I'd pick the definition, because I think it's a critical advancement of what we're trying to do. So I understand your hesitance to let the legislature tell you anything about what you need to do, but I think there's a really valuable baby going out with the bathwater if you choose not to support the definition. Thanks for listening.
Joy?
When we convey a position on the bill, will we do that in writing? We'll do a letter officially stating our position?
An analysis and our neutral position, if that's the one that's adopted, in a letter. If it's a neutral position, I won't necessarily testify in committee unless asked.
So I guess I wonder if, if we were to stick with the staff recommendation and support or have a neutral position, could we add language to our letter that makes clear that we, support the definition? There's a lot about the bill that we support and think is laudable. We've appreciated the, Senator working with us to streamline some of the requirements. I mean, to be supportive of all of his efforts and of the concept and our leadership on the issue, but without kind of getting into some of the, the issues that have come up about, what it would mean if we take a support position.
Definitely, we can do that.
Grant?
Just one other thing to note, no matter which way you go, is that, just to give you a little context, last year when this was up, we worked hard, well, not myself necessarily, but Joycelyn and her staff worked with the stakeholder, with the sponsors and with the author. And, I think it was a pretty good working relationship that they had, that we came to an agreement on amendments. The author's office was, we were very pleased with the amendments they made. I think they appreciated our input. So.
And Joyce, I'd just like to add my comments to Joyce. The fact that we already do this, that we're willing to expand what we're already reporting to go even further, would hopefully go a long way into reassuring the senator that we're on the same page. But I have a tendency to agree with my colleagues that we've already had to fight off some reporting requirements or changing divestment bills to reporting requirements. I just don't want us to drown in reports. And somewhere down the line, I worry that it is a slippery slope. So I think, would support the neutral over this report. Go ahead.